"If you knew what your husband did to your daughter, you would be disgusted," said the doctor to the mother. When the mother sees the state of the girl, she immediately calls 911. The fluorescent lights of Boston Children's Hospital cast their usual stark glow across the consultation room as Dr. Rachel Morgan reviewed her next patient's file. The morning light filtering through the windows did little to soften the clinical atmosphere, though she tried her best over the years to make the space more welcoming with carefully chosen artwork and comfortable furniture. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the extensive medical history before her. Emma Harrison, age 12, had been referred to her by the hospital's pediatric department for a psychiatric evaluation. The referral itself wasn't unusual, but the medication list gave her pause. She'd seen complex cases before, but this combination of prescriptions seemed excessive for a child Emma's age. A gentle knock at the door preceded the entrance of a girl who seemed to float rather than walk into the room. Emma Harrison moved as if underwater, her movements deliberate and sluggish. Her mother, Victoria Harrison, followed close behind, her sharp designer suit and commanding presence creating a stark contrast to her daughter's ethereal demeanor. "Good morning, Emma, Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Morgan said, rising from her desk. "I'm Dr. Morgan. It's nice to meet you both." She gestured toward the comfortable chairs she'd arranged in a small semicircle, deliberately positioned away from the more intimidating desk setup. Emma sank into one of the chairs, her honey-blonde hair falling forward to partially shield her face. Victoria took the seat beside her daughter, her posture perfect, BlackBerry already in hand. "I apologize in advance if I need to take any calls," she said, her tone clipped and professional. "We're in the middle of a major merger, and I'm leading the legal team." Dr. Morgan nodded, keeping her expression neutral even as she noted the dynamic unfolding before her. "Of course. Emma, how are you feeling today?" The girl's response came in a whisper so faint it was barely audible. "I'm okay." Her eyes, a striking shade of green, remained fixed on the carpet, their focus slightly unfocused. "Emma's been having a difficult time concentrating in school," Victoria supplied, filling the silence. "Her father, Dr. Harrison, has been managing her medication regimen, but we thought it might be helpful to get another perspective." She glanced at her phone again, though it hadn't buzzed. Dr. Morgan made a note on her pad. "I see. Emma, what's your favorite subject in school?" There was a long pause before Emma responded, her words coming slowly, as if she had to drag each one up from a great depth. "I used to like art and reading." "Used to?" Dr. Morgan prompted gently. "The medications help her focus on more important subjects," Victoria interjected. Dr. Harrison says art class was becoming a distraction from her core studies." Dr. Morgan watched as Emma's fingers twisted in the fabric of her school uniform skirt, her knuckles white with tension despite her otherwise passive demeanor. "Emma, would you like to draw while we talk? I have some supplies here." She reached for a drawer containing art materials she kept for younger patients. Before Emma could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry, I have to take this," she said, standing quickly. "Emma, sweetheart, I'll be right outside." She strode to the door, already speaking in low, urgent tones to someone about contract terms. In the sudden quiet of the room, Dr. Morgan observed as Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her movements remained lethargic as she accepted the offered sketchbook and colored pencils. "Your father is Dr. Thomas Harrison at the pediatric clinic, isn't he?" Dr. Morgan asked casually, watching as Emma began to draw with painstaking slowness. Emma nodded without looking up. "He takes care of lots of kids. He knows what's best for me." The words sounded rehearsed, delivered in that same whispery voice. Dr. Morgan glanced again at the medication list in the file, her concern deepening. The combination of anti-anxiety medications, mood stabilizers, and attention deficit disorder treatments seemed calculated to produce exactly this effect, a compliant, subdued child. "What are you drawing, Emma?" she asked, leaning forward slightly to see the paper. Emma's hand moved in slow, deliberate strokes across the page. A bird. In a cage. The image taking shape was surprisingly detailed despite her sluggish movements. A small sparrow behind ornate bars, its wings tucked close to its body. Dr. Morgan felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the girl methodically color in the cage's shadows. Does the bird want to be in the cage? Emma's hand stilled for a moment, the colored pencil hovering above the paper. When she spoke, her voice was barely a breath. It's safer in the cage. That's what Dad says. The world is too dangerous for little birds. The door opened as Victoria returned, tucking her phone away. I'm so sorry about that. How are we doing in here? Dr. Morgan watched as Emma quickly turned the sketchbook over, hiding the drawing. We're just getting to know each other, she said, keeping her tone light while making another note in the file. Mrs. Harrison, I'd like to schedule a few more sessions with Emma. If that's all right, I think it would be helpful for us to work together regularly. Victoria checked her phone's calendar. Of course, whatever you think is best. Though I should mention that Thomas usually handles all of Emma's medical appointments. He's very particular about coordinating her care. I understand, Dr. Morgan said carefully. But as the referring physician, he clearly values an independent assessment. I'll be sure to keep him updated on Emma's progress. As she watched mother and daughter leave Victoria already back on her phone, Emma drifting like a ghost beside her, Dr. Morgan picked up the discarded sketchbook. The bird in the cage stared back at her, its small eye somehow managing to convey a profound sadness despite the simple lines. She opened Emma's file again, beginning to make detailed notes. Something was very wrong in the Harrison household, and the evidence was right here in front of her, written in prescription dates, dosages, and the silent testimony of a trapped bird drawn by a child's shaking hand. Dr. Morgan reached for her office phone. She needed to speak with the hospital's chief of pediatrics about accessing more of Dr. Harrison's patient records. She had a sinking feeling Emma wasn't the only little bird in a cage. The autumn sun was setting outside her window, casting long shadows across her desk as she began her investigation. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts when it came to her patients, and every instinct she possessed was screaming that Emma Harrison was in danger, not from physical abuse, but from something perhaps more insidious. The systematic suppression of her very self, administered in carefully measured doses by someone who had sworn to do no harm. Dr. Rachel Morgan sat in her dimly lit office long after normal hours, surrounded by patient files spread across her desk. The late October wind rattled the windows of Boston Children's Hospital as she methodically built her case. Each new piece of documentation regarding Emma Harrison's treatment history only deepened her concern. Dr. Morgan? Her assistant, Marie, appeared in the doorway. Dr. Harrison is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent. Rachel's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Please send him in. She quickly organized the files on her desk, leaving only Emma's official record visible. Dr. Thomas Harrison entered with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect. Tall and distinguished in his white coat, with silver threading through his dark hair, he projected an aura of authority that had likely served him well throughout his career. Dr. Morgan, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I thought it was time we had a conversation about my daughter. Of course, Rachel gestured to the chair across from her desk. I was actually planning to reach out to you about some concerns regarding Emma's medication regimen. Harrison sat down, adjusting his coat with practiced precision. Yes, I received your request for her complete medical history. I must say I found it rather excessive. Emma's care plan has been carefully calibrated over several years. That's precisely what concerns me. Rachel kept her tone professional despite the tension building in her chest. The combination and dosage of medications she's currently prescribed is unusually aggressive for a child her age. With all due respect, Dr. Morgan, Harrison's smile tightened. I've been practicing pediatric medicine for 25 years. Emma's case is complex, requiring a delicate balance of treatments to manage her various conditions. And what conditions would those be exactly? Rachel asked, opening Emma's file. Because I've been reviewing her initial diagnoses, and I'm having trouble finding clear clinical evidence to support such extensive medication. A subtle change came over Harrison's face, something fleeting and cold that made Rachel instinctively sit straighter in her chair. I don't appreciate having my medical judgment questioned, especially regarding my own daughter, This isn't about questioning your judgment, Dr. Harrison. It's about ensuring Emma's receiving optimal care. In our sessions, I've observed significant cognitive dampening effects that could be interfering with her development. Harrison leaned forward slightly. My daughter was unmanageable before we began her current treatment protocol. Volatile, disruptive, constantly challenging authority. The medications help her function within appropriate boundaries. She's 12 years old, Rachel said quietly. Some degree of challenging authority is developmentally normal. Not in my household. Harrison's voice took on an edge. I've seen too many children destroyed by permissive parenting, Dr. Morgan. Everything I do is for Emma's protection and well-being. Rachel met his gaze steadily. Including prescribing her 3 times the recommended dosage of anti-anxiety medication? Harrison stood abruptly. I think we're done here. I'll be transferring Emma's psychiatric care to someone with a better understanding of complex pediatric cases. Someone who knows their place in the medical hierarchy. That's your right as her parent, Rachel acknowledged, keeping her voice level. But as her current psychiatrist, I'm obligated to document my concerns about her treatment. He turned back at the door, his expression now completely cold. Be very careful, Dr. Morgan. Your career is still ahead of you. It would be a shame to derail it by making unfounded allegations against a respected colleague. After he left, Rachel sat in the growing darkness of her office, her hands shaking slightly as she made detailed notes about the conversation. The threat had been clear, but it had also confirmed her worst suspicions. Emma's father wasn't just over-medicating her. He was systematically using his medical authority to control her. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she'd been holding onto for just this situation. Dr. Winters? This is Rachel Morgan. Yes, regarding the Harrison case. I need your help accessing some restricted records. I think I've found a pattern, but I need more evidence. As she spoke with the hospital's chief of medical ethics, Rachel glanced at Emma's drawing of the caged bird, which she'd carefully preserved in a clear folder. The image seemed to take on new meaning after her confrontation with Harrison. She wasn't just dealing with medical malpractice. She was witnessing the systematic imprisonment of a child's spirit, administered one prescription at a time. Later that night, as she drove home through Boston's rain-slicked streets, Rachel's mind raced with possible courses of action. She thought of Victoria Harrison, so absorbed in her high-powered legal career that she'd outsourced all medical decisions to her husband. She thought of the other children in Harrison's practice, wondering how many more birds were trapped in similar pharmaceutical cages. Her cell phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winters. Records show similar prescription patterns with other young female patients. Meeting tomorrow 8 a.m. to discuss options. Rachel felt a mix of vindication and dread. She was right about the pattern, but that only meant the situation was worse than she'd initially feared. As she pulled into her driveway, she made a decision. Professional courtesy be damned. She would not be another adult who failed to protect Emma Harrison. The rain intensified as she entered her empty house, the sound matching her troubled thoughts. Tomorrow she would begin building a case that could destroy Dr. Thomas Harrison's career. But tonight, she would lie awake wondering if she was brave enough to face the storm that was surely coming. The early morning sunlight cast long shadows across Dr. Rachel Morgan's desk as she reviewed the evidence compiled over the past 3 weeks. The stack of files before her told a disturbing story. Dr. Thomas Harrison had established a pattern of overprescribing medication to young patients, particularly girls between the ages of 11 and 14. Dr. Morgan's computer screen displayed Emma Harrison's latest blood work results, obtained through proper channels but revealing improper practices. The levels of various medications in her system exceeded standard therapeutic ranges, suggesting a deliberate attempt to maintain sedation rather than treat any legitimate medical condition. A knock at her office door interrupted her concentration. Dr. Morgan? Her assistant Marie entered, looking concerned. Emma Harrison is here, without an appointment. She's alone. Rachel stood immediately. Send her in, please. Emma entered the office with the same ethereal quality as before, but something was different. Her school uniform was slightly disheveled, and her hands trembled as she clutched her backpack. Emma? Where's your mother? Rachel asked, quickly closing the files on her desk. Working. She's always working. Emma's voice was barely audible. Dad's at a conference in Chicago. I took a taxi here. She reached into her backpack and withdrew a small notebook, its pages dog-eared and worn. I need to show you something. Rachel guided Emma to the comfortable chairs away from the desk. You came here alone? Does anyone know where you are? Emma shook her head, opening the notebook with shaking hands. I started writing things down. When the medications wear off a little. In the mornings, before Dad gives me my pills. She held out the notebook. Sometimes I forget things, but the writing helps me remember. Rachel accepted the notebook, her professional composure masking her growing alarm. The pages contained dated entries in varying states of coherence. Some were clear and detailed, others trailed off into illegible scrawls. But together, they documented a systematic pattern of overmedication and psychological manipulation. Dad says I'm sick, Emma continued, her voice stronger now, that I'm like Mom's sister who had to be institutionalized. But I found old pictures, videos from when I was younger. I wasn't always like this. Rachel felt her throat tighten as she read an entry from the previous week. Dad says the medicines keep me safe, keep me from becoming dangerous. But I remember being happy once. I remember laughing. When did laughing become dangerous? The ethical implications were clear, but the professional risks were equally evident. Direct intervention would violate multiple protocols. Yet the notebook in her hands represented a cry for help that she couldn't ignore. Emma, what you're showing me is very important, Rachel said carefully. But I need to ask, are you sure you want to share this with me? Your father might see it as a betrayal. Emma's green eyes, clearer than Rachel had ever seen them, met hers directly. I don't want to be a ghost anymore, she whispered. Please help me remember how to be real. Rachel made her decision. She reached for her phone and dialed Victoria Harrison's private number, obtained weeks ago but never used. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Mrs. Harrison, this is Dr. Rachel Morgan. I need to speak with you immediately regarding Emma. She's in my office, and there are serious matters we must discuss. Please call me as soon as possible. She then sent a text. Your daughter needs you. Medical emergency. Please come to my office immediately. Within moments, her phone buzzed with a response. In courthouse. Emergency recess in 30 minutes. Coming. Rachel turned back to Emma, who had curled up in the chair, her temporary strength seeming to fade. Your mother is on her way. Would you like some water? Or perhaps you'd like to draw while we wait? Emma nodded, accepting the sketchbook Rachel offered. As she began to draw, her movements were less lethargic than during their first meeting. The morning's medications hadn't yet taken full effect. Rachel used the time to document everything, making copies of Emma's notebook entries and preparing the medical evidence she'd gathered. She knew that within the hour, she would likely be ending her career at Boston Children's Hospital, breaking protocol to contact Victoria directly, accepting Emma without parental consent. These were serious violations. But as she watched Emma draw, this time creating an image of a bird with its wings spread wide, she knew she was making the right choice. Some protocols existed to be broken, especially when they protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. The morning sun continued its ascent, illuminating Emma's pale face as she worked on her drawing. Rachel prepared herself for the confrontation to come, knowing that the next few hours would change multiple lives irrevocably. The truth, like Emma's bird, needed to be free, regardless of the cost. In the quiet of her office, as the clock ticked toward Victoria Harrison's arrival, Dr. Rachel Morgan silently promised the girl before her that she would never again have to face her fears alone. Some promises transcended professional boundaries, and some truths demanded to be told, no matter how carefully they had been caged. Victoria Harrison burst into Dr. Morgan's office precisely 37 minutes after receiving the text, her courthouse heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her professional demeanor faltered momentarily at the sight of Emma curled in the consultation chair, sketchbook in hand. "What's this about a medical emergency?" she demanded, her litigation-trained voice filling the room. "Emma, why aren't you in school?" Dr. Morgan stood, gathering the carefully prepared documentation. "Mrs. Harrison, please sit down. What I'm about to show you requires your full attention." Victoria glanced at her phone, then at her daughter, before taking the offered seat. "Make it quick. I have a judge waiting." "Your daughter came to me this morning because she needs help," Dr. Morgan began, laying out the medical records. "I've discovered a pattern of systematic overmedication prescribed by your husband. These are Emma's current blood work results, showing dangerously high levels of multiple psychiatric medications." Victoria's litigation-trained eyes scanned the documents. "Thomas is a respected pediatrician. He wouldn't—" "Mom," Emma's voice, though quiet, cut through her mother's protests. She held out her notebook with trembling hands. "Please read it." Dr. Morgan watched as Victoria accepted the notebook, her professional facade cracking as she read her daughter's desperate entries. The color drained from her face. "I've also documented similar patterns with other young patients in Dr. Harrison's practice," Dr. Morgan continued, her voice gentle but firm. "He's been using his medical authority to essentially sedate young girls into compliance, disguising it as treatment for manufactured conditions." Victoria's hand flew to her mouth as she read a particularly coherent entry. "Dad says the medicines make me better, but I can't remember what better feels like anymore." "Oh God," Victoria whispered. "Emma, baby." She reached for her daughter, but Emma shrank back slightly, years of emotional distance creating a chasm between them. "Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Morgan leaned forward, "I understand this is overwhelming, but we need to act quickly. Your husband returns from Chicago tomorrow, and Emma needs immediate medical intervention to safely withdraw from these medications." Victoria's lawyer instincts suddenly kicked in. "We'll need documentation, records, witness statements." "I have everything prepared," Dr. Morgan indicated the files. "But right now, Emma needs her mother to protect her." Victoria looked at her daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Emma sat perfectly still, her father's chemical restraints still flowing through her veins, but her eyes were pleading. "The police," Victoria said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "We need to call them now. And I want a complete toxicology screen done immediately." She paused, her voice breaking. "My baby. What has he done to my baby?" As Victoria made the calls, Dr. Morgan moved to sit beside Emma, who had begun to tremble more violently. "You're very brave," she said softly. "Everything's going to change now. But I promise you won't have to face it alone." The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and tears. Victoria's legal expertise shifted into high gear once the initial shock wore off, coordinating with authorities and hospital administration. Dr. Morgan provided her documented evidence of Thomas's systematic abuse of medical authority, not just with Emma but with other young patients. By evening, an emergency court order was in place preventing Thomas Harrison from contacting his daughter or accessing her medical records. Victoria had arranged for a security detail at their home and the hospital, her years of legal connections proving invaluable. As twilight settled over Boston, Emma finally slept in a supervised hospital room, the first steps of her medication withdrawal carefully monitored. Victoria sat by her bedside, her power suit wrinkled, her face streaked with dried tears. "I should have seen it," she whispered as Dr. Morgan checked Emma's vital signs. "I'm her mother. How did I not see it?" "He was careful, Dr. Morgan replied gently. "He used his authority as both a father and a doctor to hide what he was doing. The important thing is that you're seeing it now." Victoria gripped her sleeping daughter's hand. "I'll destroy him for this," she said, her voice hardening with the same determination that had made her one of Boston's top corporate lawyers. "He won't hurt another child. Ever." Dr. Morgan nodded, updating Emma's chart. Outside the hospital room, police officers stood guard, and somewhere in Chicago, Thomas Harrison was about to receive the call that would end his carefully constructed facade of control. But in this quiet moment, watching mother and daughter begin their long journey back to each other, Dr. Morgan felt a profound sense of rightness. Sometimes healing could only begin after everything fell apart. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, her face peaceful for the first time since Dr. Morgan had met her. The bird was finally free of its cage, though learning to fly again would take time. But at least now she had a chance. And a mother who would never look away again. The media storm broke over Boston Children's Hospital like a winter nor'easter. Dr. Rachel Morgan watched from her office window as news vans gathered outside, their satellite dishes raised like thorny crowns against the gray November sky. Inside the hospital's administrative wing, an emergency board meeting had been in session for 3 hours. The arrest of Dr. Thomas Harrison at O'Hare International Airport had triggered a cascade of investigations, putting the hospital's oversight procedures under intense scrutiny. Dr. Morgan? Marie appeared at her door. "They're ready for you in the conference room." Rachel gathered her documentation and made her way through the hushed corridors. Hospital staff stepped aside as she passed, their expressions a mix of respect and unease. Breaking ranks to expose a colleague had marked her as either a hero or a traitor, depending on one's perspective. The conference room held a collection of grave faces. The hospital board, legal representatives, and investigators from the state medical board. At the center of the long table sat Victoria Harrison, transformed from corporate lawyer to avenging mother, her laptop open to a spreadsheet of Dr. Harrison's patient records. "Dr. Morgan," the board chairman gestured to an empty seat. "Please walk us through your initial observations that led to this investigation." Rachel spoke for nearly an hour, methodically presenting her evidence. She detailed Emma's symptoms, the excessive medication protocols, and the patterns she discovered in Dr. Harrison's other young patients. Throughout her presentation, Victoria maintained a rigid composure, though her knuckles whitened around her pen when Rachel described Emma's secret journal. "We've identified 17 other cases so far," Victoria added when Rachel finished. "All girls between 11 and 14. All prescribed similar combinations of medications without adequate documentation of symptoms or proper follow-up evaluations." The state medical investigator leaned forward. "And you believe Dr. Harrison specifically targeted this age group?" "Yes," Rachel responded. "The pattern suggests he focused on girls approaching adolescence, using medication to suppress natural developmental changes that he viewed as problematic." The implications hung heavy in the air. A respected pediatrician had systematically drugged young girls into compliance, starting with his own daughter, and the system had failed to catch it. The meeting continued well into the evening, discussing oversight reforms and patient notification protocols. Rachel's mind kept returning to Emma, now in her 3rd day of carefully monitored medication withdrawal. When she finally returned to the pediatric psychiatric ward, she found Victoria outside Emma's room, speaking quietly with a detective. Inside, Emma was experiencing her first clear evening in years, though the physical symptoms of withdrawal left her pale and shaking. "The media's requesting interviews," Victoria said as Rachel checked Emma's vital signs. "They want her story." "Our story." "She's not ready," Rachel replied firmly. "Emma needs time to find her own voice again before she can share it with the world." Victoria nodded, watching her daughter through the window. Emma was attempting to actually read, not just stare blankly at pages, though her hands still trembled too much to hold the book steady. "We've had calls from other parents," Victoria said softly. "They're starting to recognize the signs in their own daughters. This is going to get bigger before it gets better." Rachel updated Emma's chart, noting the gradual reduction in withdrawal symptoms. "How are you holding up?" Victoria's professional facade cracked slightly. "I keep thinking about all the times she tried to tell me something was wrong. But I was always too busy, too trusting in Thomas's medical judgment." She pressed her hand against the window. "I left her alone with her jailer." "You're here now," Rachel reminded her. "And Emma needs you focused on the future, not lost in guilt over the past." Inside the room, Emma had fallen into an uneasy sleep, her book slipping from her grasp. Victoria entered quietly to cover her with a blanket, her movements tentative, as if she was still learning how to mother without her husband's toxic influence. Rachel made her final notes of the day, knowing tomorrow would bring more investigations, more revelations, more painful truths to face. But watching Victoria gently smooth her daughter's hair, she saw hope in the simple gesture of maternal love, finally awake and alert to its own power. The media circus would continue, the investigations would expand, and the medical community would be forced to confront its failures. But in this quiet hospital room, the real work of healing had already begun, one trembling page, one gentle touch, one clear moment at a time. December brought early snow to Boston, coating the hospital grounds in pristine white as Emma Harrison began her 6th week of recovery. Dr. Rachel Morgan observed the marked changes in her young patient with cautious optimism. The physical symptoms of withdrawal had largely subsided, though the psychological journey was only beginning. Today marked a significant milestone: Emma's first group therapy session with other survivors from her father's practice. The hospital had converted a comfortable conference room into a safe space, with soft lighting and circular seating designed to promote openness and equality. Emma entered the room precisely at 10 o'clock, Victoria close behind her. The transformation in both mother and daughter was striking. Emma's movements, though still careful, had lost their drugged weightlessness. She carried herself with emerging awareness, her green eyes clear and observant. Victoria had exchanged her court-ready suits for more casual attire, her attention fully focused on her daughter rather than her phone. "Good morning, Emma," Rachel greeted her. "Are you ready to meet the others?" Emma nodded, though her hands twisted nervously in the fabric of her sweater. Will they be like me?" "They've had similar experiences," Rachel explained gently. "Each story is unique, but you all share a common journey toward recovery." For other girls arrived with their parents, each carrying the invisible weight of betrayed trust. Rachel had selected them carefully for this initial group, all within a year of Emma's age, all showing promising signs of recovery. Their parents gathered in a separate support room down the hall, where Victoria would join them after ensuring Emma was settled. "Before we begin," Rachel addressed the group, "I want you to know that this is your space. There's no pressure to speak if you don't feel ready. Sometimes listening is just as important as sharing." The girls sat in cautious silence at first, studying each other with the wariness of those accustomed to having their perceptions doubted. Rachel guided them through simple introduction exercises, watching as their rigid postures gradually relaxed. It was Lily, the youngest, who broke the ice. "Did your dad tell you that you were dangerous too?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Emma spoke, her voice gaining strength with each word. "He said I had too many feelings, that they would hurt me if he didn't control them." A current of recognition passed through the group. One by one, similar stories emerged, of emotions labeled as symptoms, of natural adolescent changes treated as pathology, of childhood vibrancy dulled by calculated chemical restraint. "I found my old dance recital videos," shared Madison, her dark hair falling forward as she spoke. "I used to love performing, but then the medicines made me too dizzy to dance." Emma's response came with unexpected clarity. "He took our colors away, made us gray so we wouldn't stand out." The session continued, pain and understanding flowing between these young survivors. Rachel observed as Emma gradually emerged as a gentle leader, her own healing journey giving strength to others. When she shared excerpts from her secret journal, several girls nodded in recognition, some revealing similar hidden records of their clouded years. Victoria watched through the observation window, tears sliding silently down her face. Other parents stood with her, their shared guilt and determination creating new bonds of support and advocacy. After the session, as the group dispersed with promises to return next week, Emma lingered behind. She approached Rachel's desk with measured steps, pulling out her latest journal, no longer a secret record of fog and fear, but a chronicle of awakening. "I wrote something," she said, "for the other girls. And for myself." She opened to a carefully written page. "It's about finding our voices again." Rachel read the poem Emma had composed, recognizing in its simple lines the profound journey from silence to speech, from isolation to community. The final stanza spoke of birds learning to sing again, their individual songs joining to break the spell of silence. As they left the hospital that evening, the snow continued to fall, covering the day's footprints with fresh possibility. Emma walked beside her mother, their steps naturally falling into sync. She was no longer floating through her days but walking firmly on solid ground, each step a choice, each word a reclamation of her true self. Rachel watched them go, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new memories to process, new emotions to navigate. But today had proven that healing, like voice, grows stronger when shared. The silence that had protected their abuser was being transformed, word by word, into a chorus of recovery. The Suffolk County Courthouse stood austere against the January sky as Victoria Harrison ascended the steps, Emma close by her side. Dr. Rachel Morgan followed, carrying her testimony notes in a leather portfolio. After 2 months of preliminary hearings, the criminal trial of Dr. Thomas Harrison was about to begin. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution had arranged their evidence methodically. Medical records, prescription histories, and expert testimony documenting a decade-long pattern of medical abuse. District Attorney Sarah Collins had built an unprecedented case, combining charges of medical malpractice with child endangerment and institutional abuse of power. Thomas Harrison sat at the defense table, his formerly commanding presence diminished by prison-issued attire. His eyes followed Emma as she took her seat in the front row, but she deliberately turned away, focusing instead on the notebook in her hands, her newest journal, filled with clear, steady writing. The proceedings began with opening statements. D.A. Collins addressed the jury with measured precision. This case will demonstrate how Dr. Harrison systematically abused his position of trust, using medical knowledge not to heal, but to control vulnerable young patients, beginning with his own daughter. The defense attempted to paint Harrison's actions as medically justified, but their arguments faltered against the weight of evidence. Expert witnesses from leading medical institutions testified about the inappropriate prescription patterns and the absence of documented clinical necessity. When Emma took the stand on the third day, the courtroom fell silent. Gone was the ethereal, drugged child from 4 months ago. In her place sat a composed young woman, her voice clear as she described her years of chemical captivity. "I remember the first time I noticed the changes," Emma testified, her hands steady in her lap. "I was 10 and I'd won an art competition at school. Dad said I was becoming too aggressive, too focused on standing out. The new medications started after that." Victoria gripped Rachel's hand as Emma continued, describing how the medications gradually increased, how her father justified each new prescription as necessary for her protection. The jury listened intently as she read excerpts from her secret journal, the written proof of her conscious mind fighting through the pharmaceutical fog. During cross-examination, the defense attorney attempted to suggest that Emma's memories were unreliable, tainted by withdrawal and therapy. Emma's response was unwavering. "The medications didn't protect me from danger. They were the danger. They stole my voice, my art, my ability to feel anything deeply. But they couldn't take away my ability to know what was happening to me." Other victims testified throughout the week, their stories creating a damning pattern of systematic abuse. Parents spoke of their misplaced trust, of watching their daughters fade into shadows of themselves. Medical experts explained how Harrison had exploited his reputation to avoid scrutiny, using his position to silence any questions about his methods. The prosecution's final witness was Dr. Rachel Morgan. She presented her clinical observations and the documentation that had finally exposed Harrison's actions. "In my professional assessment," she testified, Dr. Harrison's treatment protocols were designed not to address legitimate medical concerns, but to chemically suppress natural adolescent development that he viewed as threatening. Thomas Harrison declined to testify in his own defense. He sat impassively as the jury delivered their verdict after just 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was unprecedented in its severity. 25 years in prison, permanent revocation of his medical license, and substantial financial restitution to his victims. As the courthouse emptied, Emma stood in the January sunlight, breathing deeply. Victoria wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, and this time, Emma leaned into the embrace. Rachel watched them descend the courthouse steps together, noting how Emma's steps were sure and purposeful. "It's really over," Emma said quietly, looking back at the courthouse. "He can't hurt anyone else now." Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead. "You did that, sweetheart. Your courage made this happen." Rachel saw other families from the support group gathering nearby, their presence a testament to the community that had grown from shared healing. The trial's conclusion marked more than just legal justice. It represented the triumph of truth over authority, of vulnerability transformed into strength. As they walked away from the courthouse, Emma opened her journal and began to write, recording this moment in her own clear voice. The justice system had spoken, but the most powerful verdict had already been delivered. Emma Harrison had reclaimed her story, and no one would ever silence her again. The February sun cast long shadows through the windows of Boston Children's Hospital's main conference room as Victoria Harrison addressed the board of directors. Her presentation, Systematic Reform in Pediatric Care, represented months of research and advocacy work stemming from her daughter's case. The Harrison Protocol, she explained, indicating the comprehensive documentation before them, establishes a new standard for monitoring prescription patterns and implementing safeguards against medical abuse. We cannot allow another physician to exploit institutional trust the way my husband did. The protocol had already garnered attention from medical centers across the country. Its key innovations included mandatory peer review of long-term pediatric medication plans, enhanced documentation requirements for psychiatric prescriptions, and a revolutionary patient advocacy system that gave children direct access to independent medical oversight. Dr. Rachel Morgan observed from her position at the conference table, noting how Victoria seamlessly balanced her legal expertise with her newfound role as a patient rights advocate. The corporate lawyer who had once been too busy to question her daughter's treatment had transformed into a formidable force for institutional change. Meanwhile, in the hospital's newly established Youth Advocacy Center, Emma Harrison led her weekly peer support session. The program, developed in conjunction with Dr. Morgan, provided a structured environment for young survivors of medical abuse to assist in their own recovery while helping others. Today, Emma worked with a recently identified victim of another physician who had adopted Thomas Harrison's methods. The most important thing to remember, Emma told the younger girl, her voice steady and compassionate, is that your feelings are valid. No one has the right to medicate away your personality. The ripple effects of the Harrison case continued to expand. Medical boards across 3 states had launched investigations into similar prescription patterns, identifying dozens of cases that might have gone unnoticed without the precedent established by Emma's story. The American Academy of Pediatrics had convened a special task force to develop new guidelines for psychiatric medication in adolescents. Dr. Morgan's role had evolved as well. Her decision to break protocol and intervene in Emma's case had initially threatened her career, but it had ultimately elevated her to a position of greater influence. She now headed the hospital's new medical ethics and patient advocacy division, where she trained other healthcare providers to recognize signs of systematic abuse. The challenge, she explained to a group of medical residents, lies in balancing necessary treatment with patient autonomy. Medicine should enhance life, not suppress it. The institutional changes, though significant, were secondary to the personal transformations. Victoria had restructured her legal practice to focus on patient advocacy while maintaining her corporate expertise. She now moved through life with heightened awareness, her professional skills sharpened by personal experience. Emma's recovery had become a model for other young survivors. Though she still experienced occasional anxiety, she had developed healthy coping mechanisms and a strong support system. Her artwork, once suppressed by medication, had flourished. Her latest series, displayed in the Youth Advocacy Center, depicted various stages of healing through powerful visual metaphors. The Harrison Protocol's implementation marked a fundamental shift in pediatric care. Medical institutions across the country began adopting its guidelines, creating a network of safeguards designed to protect vulnerable patients. The protocol's most innovative feature, direct access to patient advocates, gave children a voice in their own medical care, ensuring that future Emma Harrisons would not suffer in silence. As winter gradually yielded to spring, the case's influence continued to grow. Legal precedents established during Thomas Harrison's trial were cited in similar cases, leading to increased scrutiny of medical authority and stronger protections for patient rights. The medical community, initially defensive, began to embrace reform as necessary for maintaining public trust. Victoria's weekly support group for parents had expanded to include families from across New England. Together, they worked to transform their guilt and anger into constructive action, advocating for changes in medical oversight and supporting other families navigating similar challenges. The ripple effect touched countless lives, from hospital administration to individual patient care. Each new policy, each reformed procedure, each strengthened safeguard represented another step toward ensuring that medicine remained a tool for healing rather than control. The Harrison case had exposed a critical vulnerability in the medical system, but its lasting legacy would be the transformation of that vulnerability into a foundation for positive change. A bright March morning dawned over Boston as Emma Harrison prepared for her first day at a new school. The decision to transfer had come after careful consideration by both Emma and Victoria, supported by Dr. Rachel Morgan. Riverdale Academy offered smaller class sizes and a strong arts program, providing an ideal environment for Emma's continued recovery. Victoria adjusted her daughter's uniform tie in the kitchen of their new townhouse, their fresh start manifesting in both location and lifestyle. "Remember, you can call me anytime," she said. Her morning schedule deliberately cleared for this important transition. Emma's response reflected her growing confidence. "I know, Mom. Dr. Morgan says it's normal to be nervous, but I'm ready." She gathered her art supplies, each brush and pencil carefully chosen to support her developing talent. At Riverdale Academy, Principal Margaret Chun had implemented specific protocols developed in consultation with Dr. Morgan to support Emma's integration. Teachers were briefed on her history without compromising her privacy, and a counselor remained available without hovering. The school's approach exemplified the institutional changes spreading through Boston's educational community in response to the Harrison case. Emma's art teacher, Ms. Lambert, recognized the therapeutic value of creative expression and provided gentle encouragement. During her first class, Emma began work on a self-portrait, her strokes deliberate and assured. The emerging image showed not just her physical features but captured something deeper, a sense of self-awareness that had been chemically suppressed for so long. Victoria maintained regular contact with Dr. Morgan, who continued to oversee Emma's recovery. Their weekly meetings now focused less on crisis management and more on long-term development. Emma's progress served as a model for other recovering patients, demonstrating the resilience of the young mind when freed from inappropriate chemical constraints. The Harrison Protocol's implementation at Boston Children's Hospital had established new standards for pediatric care. Victoria's legal expertise ensured that these changes became permanently integrated into hospital policy, while Dr. Morgan's oversight guaranteed their practical effectiveness. Their collaboration exemplified how professional skills and personal experience could combine to create meaningful reform. Emma's peer support work continued to evolve. She developed a mentoring program for younger survivors, sharing her experiences through art therapy sessions. Her own artwork gained recognition for its powerful themes of emergence and renewal, leading to an invitation to display her pieces at a children's rights advocacy conference. The spring semester progressed, marking positive changes in both mother and daughter. Victoria's reformed legal practice flourished as she balanced corporate law with patient advocacy. Emma's academic performance reflected her natural intelligence, finally free to express itself without chemical interference. Their relationship deepened through shared experiences and open communication, replacing the prescribed silence of their past. Dr. Morgan observed these developments with professional satisfaction and personal joy. The comprehensive approach to recovery, combining medical oversight, educational support, and family therapy, provided a template for treating other survivors of medical abuse. Her department expanded to accommodate increasing referrals as other institutions recognized the value of their methods. As March gave way to April, Emma's recovery continued to demonstrate the effectiveness of patient-centered care. Her success story, documented through medical records and artistic expression, offered hope to other families beginning their own healing journeys. The patterns of recovery, once established, created a framework for lasting positive change. The transformation extended beyond individual healing to institutional reform, proving that systematic abuse could be not just exposed but prevented through vigilant oversight and empowered advocacy. Emma's journey from silent victim to confident survivor illustrated the profound impact of giving children a voice in their own medical care. 1 year after the trial of Dr. Thomas Harrison, Dr. Rachel Morgan stood at the podium of the National Medical Ethics Conference in Boston, introducing the keynote speaker. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel was filled to capacity with medical professionals, legal experts, and patient advocates from across the country. Our next speaker, Dr. Morgan announced, represents the future of patient advocacy and medical accountability. At 13 years old, she has already transformed pediatric care standards across the nation. Please welcome Emma Harrison. Emma approached the podium with measured confidence, her presentation materials organized precisely as she had practiced. Victoria watched from the front row, pride evident in her expression as her daughter addressed the distinguished audience. "A year ago, I couldn't have stood before you," Emma began, her voice clear and steady. "I existed in a medically induced fog, my personality suppressed by unnecessary medications prescribed by my father. Today, I stand here as proof that recovery is possible when we give children the right to be heard." Her presentation, through the patient's eyes, combined statistical analysis of the Harrison Protocol's impact with powerful personal testimony. She shared artwork created during different stages of her recovery, each piece illustrating the journey from suppression to expression. The medical professionals in attendance leaned forward, confronted with the human cost of unchecked authority. The Harrison Protocol had been adopted by 78 major medical institutions across the country. Initial data showed a 40% increase in the identification and prevention of inappropriate long-term medication in pediatric patients. Victoria's legal framework had been incorporated into hospital policies nationwide, while Dr. Morgan's patient advocacy program had become a model for medical institutions internationally. Emma concluded her presentation with the unveiling of her latest painting, a striking portrait of a young girl emerging from shadows into light, her eyes clear and direct. The image captured both personal triumph and universal hope, serving as a powerful reminder of medicine's true purpose: to heal, not control. The standing ovation that followed represented more than professional courtesy. It acknowledged a fundamental shift in medical culture, initiated by a child's courage to question authority and supported by those who chose to listen. After the conference, Emma, Victoria, and Dr. Morgan gathered in the hotel garden. The spring evening was mild, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze as they discussed the day's impact. Emma's latest journal lay open beside her, its pages filled with clear, confident writing, a far cry from the desperate whispers of her secret records a year ago. "The protocol is working," Victoria reported, sharing the latest implementation data. "We've identified 15 potential cases this quarter alone, before any harm was done," Emma added, "and the peer support network has expanded to every major children's hospital in New England. We're helping other kids find their voices." Dr. Morgan observed her young patient, noting how Emma's natural intelligence and compassion had flourished once freed from chemical constraints. The traumatized girl who had first entered her office had transformed into a powerful advocate for patient rights, her experience shaping institutional reform. The sunset painted the Boston skyline in shades of possibility as they discussed future initiatives. Victoria's legal practice had become a leading force in medical accountability, while Dr. Morgan's department set new standards for patient advocacy. But perhaps the most profound change was evident in the relationship between mother and daughter, the trust and understanding that had grown from shared healing. Emma's final journal entry for the day captured the essence of their journey. "Clear eyes see truth. Clear voices speak it. And sometimes, the greatest courage lies not in fighting battles alone, but in letting others help us rise above our pain to create meaningful change." As they left the hotel, Emma paused to watch the evening stars emerge. Her voice, once silenced by medications, now carried the authority of lived experience and the promise of continued transformation. The story of the Harrison case would be studied in medical schools and law programs, but its true legacy lived in every child who would now be heard, every parent who would question more carefully, and every medical professional who would remember that their first duty was to do no harm. The bird had not only escaped its cage, it had helped build a world where such cages could no longer exist unquestioned.